Claire Vaughn didn't whisper when she said it. Her voice carried, sharp and polished, just like her diamond cuff. "This table is for donors, not delivery boys," she said with a soft chuckle, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, just quiet enough to feign innocence. A few laughed politely, unsure if they should. The man beside her didn't look up. He wore a plain black t-shirt and jeans. No cufflinks, no watch, no tailored anything. Just stillness. Calm. He simply sipped from his water glass, his eyes on the auctioneer across the ballroom. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. And somehow, that silence rattled her more than any comeback ever could. She shifted in her seat, her smile tightening. "You must be very confident to dress like that here." No reply. Not a glance. Just the sound of a glass being gently set down. Around the table, a few forks paused midair. Someone cleared their throat. But no one spoke. That's how Claire liked it. Her voice the loudest in the room, even when she whispered. But something felt different tonight. The man's quiet didn't feel like submission. It felt like choice. A waiter passed, nodding politely to him. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" "Sir." Not sir, like a formality. Sir, like respect. Claire caught it. Her fingers curled slightly beneath the table. She leaned in again. "Is this performance art? The whole minimalist mystery man thing?" He looked at her, finally. Just for a second. His gaze wasn't harsh. It wasn't anything. And that nothing hit harder than 1,000 words. He turned back to his glass. Claire smirked, but her throat tightened. Then the orchestra slowed. A hush spread like a wave. From the grand staircase, a single spotlight flared. Prince William had entered. The moment Prince William stepped onto the stage, Claire straightened. This was her moment, the culmination of everything she'd curated. Image, status, control. But as the applause trickled in and the prince began to speak, she could feel it slipping. Not visibly. Not yet. But underneath, where the applause didn't reach. Claire Vaughn hadn't always belonged. She'd built her way in. Born to a modest solicitor and a schoolteacher in Sussex, her entry into high society had been anything but seamless. She learned early that the right gown, the right tone, and most importantly, the right people to exclude could shape a narrative. She had turned exclusion into art. A glance, a smirk, a single word too loud. Her charm wasn't warmth. It was power. Controlled, curated, and always calculated. She'd done it before, mocked a nervous intern at a donor dinner for mispronouncing Monet, questioned a Nigerian artist's credentials with a backhanded compliment, told a French ambassador's wife that her necklace looked bravely inherited. These moments never made headlines. They didn't have to. The effect was in the room. The discomfort was the point. Back at the gala, the man in the t-shirt, still silent, still composed, sat next to her like gravity. The more he said nothing, the more her voice rose, softened, struck. "Would you like me to ask the kitchen if they have a spare jacket?" she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. A few guests chuckled, but fewer than before. Across the table, Lord Ainsworth sipped his wine too fast. The banker's wife glanced down at her napkin. It wasn't judgment yet, it was unease. The kind that turns applause into quiet glances and questions unspoken. Claire noticed. And it only made her press harder. "You could show up in gym clothes and still be called authentic these days," she remarked to no one in particular. "I suppose effort is no longer fashionable." Her voice floated over the table like a slow knife. Still, the man didn't respond, didn't shift, just kept eating, calm as ever. Elsewhere, subtle movements told their own stories. A waiter lingered, uncertain whether to refill her glass. The event coordinator passed by with a clipboard, caught Claire's eye, and quickly looked away. Nearby, a reporter from the Telegraph whispered to her colleague, "She's dangerous, but untouchable." At least she was. Backroom murmurs had already started before tonight. One major donor had quietly stepped back from her foundation 6 weeks ago, citing optics. Another philanthropist had declined her brunch invitation with an excuse about a conflicting art installation. Nothing ever said out loud, just doors that stopped opening. Claire didn't connect those dots. Not yet. She was still performing, still certain she controlled the room. But then he raised his paddle. 90,000 pounds. calm, precise, silent. Claire laughed too loudly. "How bold of you," she said, lips parted in mock amazement. "Admirable, really. Or maybe ambitious is the better word." Another chuckle, softer this time, came from someone 3 seats down. Not at her joke, at her. She felt it. And still, he said nothing. He raised the paddle again. 100,000 pounds. The auctioneer's gavel echoed. Sold. That sound, final, indifferent, landed harder than Claire expected. She smiled, of course. She always did. But it cracked at the corners. She leaned in, voice dipped in velvet. "Do let me know if you'll need help covering the final payment. Or perhaps we could start a little fundraiser just for you." This time, someone across the table coughed. No one laughed. Narration filled the silence he left behind. His refusal to engage wasn't weakness. It was strength. His stillness felt earned. He wasn't trying to belong. He simply did. And that, for someone like Claire, who had clawed and climbed and postured her way into every room, that was terrifying. He didn't say a word. But suddenly, everyone else started watching. Prince William's voice cut gently through the quiet, amplified but intimate, like he was speaking to each guest directly. "Tonight, we celebrate not just generosity, but quiet impact," he began. Claire folded her hands neatly in her lap. She tilted her chin upward, a practiced half-smile fixed on her lips, already imagining her name in the prince's next sentence. The room leaned in. Crystal clinked faintly as glasses were set down. Breath was held. Cameras readied. But one guest, William continued, asked for no recognition, no title, no name printed in tonight's program. Someone who believes true philanthropy requires presence, not performance. Claire's smile faltered by a fraction. "He has funded schools across Kenya," William continued, "rebuilt hospitals in Cambodia, and just this month became a co-owner of the Royal Horizon Foundation." A pause. Sharp. Waited. The moment cracked open. "Please join me in thanking Keanu Reeves." There it was. The name. Spoken clearly. Publicly. A ripple surged through the ballroom. A few audible gasps. Glasses lowered. People turned. Claire didn't. She sat still, very still, her spine a rod of glass. Her face didn't move. But inside she was burning. Keanu rose slowly, nodding once toward the prince, then again to the crowd. A few people began to clap, hesitantly at first, then stronger, louder. He hadn't smiled. He hadn't bowed. But somehow the applause grew as if the room had been waiting for this moment to choose a side. Claire turned toward him at last, her voice low, carefully shaped, almost sweet. "Don't misunderstand," she said. "I admire your confidence. But you must see how this looks." He didn't flinch. He looked at her, not coldly, not cruelly, just present, calm. Then he said, quiet as breath, "Like someone wandered into a Monet with muddy boots?" Her smile shattered. Not on her face, there it held, but deep beneath it, something cracked. The silence afterward was louder than the applause. Narration filled the space where her voice used to be. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. All she could do was sit, listening to people cheer for the man she'd dismissed, laughed at, diminished. She had tried to erase him, to perform him out of the room. And now she was the one fading. He didn't look at her again. He didn't need to. He returned to his seat, folding quietly back into the table's rhythm like nothing had changed. But everything had. Claire's hands tightened in her lap, hidden under the tablecloth, her diamond ring pressed into her skin. Her pulse throbbed at her temple. Across from her, the banker avoided eye contact. Beside her, the countess adjusted her napkin. Conversation at table one resumed, but it no longer flowed through her. She stared at the linen in front of her, watching the shadows shift beneath the chandelier. Her thoughts scrambled, not in fear, but disbelief. Owner, co-owner of the foundation, the painting, the auction, the room itself. He hadn't just entered her world. He'd built part of it. And no one had warned her. No one had stopped her. They had let her mock him, right up to the moment he stood in the spotlight. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't grand. It was worse. It was quiet. Keanu whispered something to the prince, who laughed gently, placing a hand on his shoulder before returning to the crowd. Cameras flashed. Someone called his name. Claire stared forward, her throat dry. She reached for her champagne, but couldn't quite lift it. Her fingers felt numb. She wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. Now she was simply undone. Not by anything he'd said, but by everything he hadn't. She had made herself the center of the scene. And still, the room had turned away. The cruelest ending wasn't being humiliated. It was being irrelevant. Claire sat frozen, spine straight, expression composed, a sculpture of grace under fire. But inside she was falling. The applause had faded. The wine had been poured. Conversation resumed in scattered waves, but none of it reached her. She looked around, subtly, carefully. Lord Ainsworth, now angled toward someone else. The banker from Zurich leaned in to speak with a tech mogul, nodding as if Claire wasn't inches away. The Countess, who once hung on her every word, offered a brief, tight smile, and then turned her attention to a discussion about the floral arrangements. No one asked her opinion. No one asked her anything. She raised her glass to sip, hoping to feel something solid. The stem nearly slipped through her fingers. When she looked up, a photographer on the far side of the ballroom adjusted his lens, not toward her, but past her, to where Keanu stood beside Prince William. The light from the chandelier caught the edge of his black t-shirt. People clustered near him now. They weren't asking who he was. They were quoting what he'd done. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She opened it without urgency. 3 texts from her assistant, one from a journalist, another from a foundation board member. None were about her dress, her seat, or her presence. They all asked the same question, quietly, indirectly. What happened? Claire closed the messages. She didn't respond. She stood slowly and stepped away from the table, gliding between groups of guests like a ghost no one noticed. Past the velvet curtains, down the mirror hallway. The air was cooler. She stopped in front of the tall gilded mirror outside the coat room. The silver gown still shimmered. The pearls were perfectly pinned. She reapplied her lipstick with calm precision, as if the ritual could reset the night. Another notification buzzed. She didn't check it. Behind her, a camera flash illuminated the hallway. It wasn't for her. It never turned her way. She heard Keanu's voice, low and even, from the ballroom. Heard the laughter that followed. William's laugh. Others joining in. Warm, real, effortless. Claire didn't move. A young woman, vaguely familiar, someone from the arts committee in Vienna, maybe passed by. Claire summoned a smile. He certainly made an entrance, she said lightly, hoping to anchor herself in the conversation, as if nothing had changed. The woman nodded. Indeed. But it's the quiet ones who change things, she replied, voice soft but sure, and then walked on. The words settled like dust Claire couldn't brush off. She took one last look in the mirror and walked back toward the ballroom, but didn't re-enter. She didn't make a speech. She didn't seek a moment of redemption or reclaim the spotlight. There was nothing left to reclaim. The music inside continued. A soft waltz. Conversations bloomed like small fires around Keanu. People leaned in to hear him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. They listened anyway. No one turned when Claire passed. No one stopped her. No one whispered her name. Her exit wasn't scandalous. It wasn't noticed. And that was the point. Outside, the air was crisp. A valet stepped forward, recognizing her, but she lifted a hand gently, telling him she'd wait. Not yet. Not like this. Her phone buzzed again. Another journalist. This time. Were you aware of Mr. Reeves' role before the announcement? She stared at the screen, then slipped it back into her clutch. Narration filled the silence her voice used to occupy. Claire Vaughn had always believed power was performance, elegance, tone, a room arranged like a chessboard. But real power? It didn't need permission. It wore sneakers. It spoke softly. It let the world expose itself. She had tried to stage the moment. He had simply been the moment. Now she stood alone outside the gala she once ruled, wrapped in designer fabric, shielded by pearls, but invisible. Not erased. Just forgotten. Sometimes silence doesn't follow disgrace. It follows irrelevance.